Hi guys, I'm Mike and this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back guys to another Monday's edition of Driver Ratings. We have just had the Sochi Grand Prix yesterday, and again it was a race marred with controversy in terms of team orders. Well, we're going to look at the performances of the drivers on track and I'm going to give them my rating out of 10. We're going to go through 1 to 20 in the order, and yeah guys, we'll find out whether you agree with me or not. Guys, if you're new around here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification and you can keep up to date with all our latest content and watch more videos for this. But for now, let's get into those driver ratings. So coming in at P1, and rather unexpectedly, but if you give Mercedes a sniff of victory, they are going to take it. And Lewis Hamilton, for the first time since Hungary, has won a Grand Prix. And I thought Mercedes did everything that they could to win this race. Obviously in qualifying they chose to go on the medium compound, and with the safety car coming out when it did, if they'd been on the softer compound, I'm not sure they would have been out in time to take advantage of that. So being on the medium compound proved to be a vital decision that they could then, under virtual safety car, make that swap to softs and maintain track position. So I'm going to give Lewis Hamilton an 8 out of 10. I thought it was a very solid driver from the Brit, shows why he's champion. Obviously helped by that virtual safety car, but he didn't really put a foot wrong on track, so it is an 8 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton from me. In P2, we have his teammate Valtteri Bottas, and usually Sochi is a very strong track for him, but for once he was actually not able to match Lewis Hamilton's times on track. But by the Finnish driver, I still thought it was a very good performance. Like his teammate, benefited from the virtual safety car, but defended very well against Charles Leclerc at the end and managed to maintain that gap, that he was never really under threat, even though they were both on this soft compound. So for me, Valtteri Bottas is also scoring an 8 out of 10 for today. I thought it was a very strong race for him as well, and Mercedes clinching that 1-2. If it wasn't already, I think we all know it guys, but it pretty much secures Constructors and Drivers' Championship for Lewis Hamilton. In P3, Charles, the centre of another team orders controversy, or things not coming out to plan how he thought. And obviously Charles Leclerc, again on a Saturday, he is exceptional, and I think Charles Leclerc is an absolutely brilliant driver, and I cannot wait to see how his career unfolds, but I'm going to criticise him here today. I think over radio again, team orders and critical, you do not get handed race wins in Formula 1. This is the pinnacle of motorsport. I don't care what plan you had. You know, Sebastian Vettel got an absolutely fantastic start. Regardless of the plan, he was quicker than Charles Leclerc all day up until that MG UK failure. And for me, in a car that should have dominated, and he should have at least been able to gain one position off the Mercedes in terms of Valtteri Bottas at the end there, it was still a good drive because he gains a podium, but it is certainly not taking advantage of the Ferrari car that he had in his hands. He wasn't able to match Vettel this weekend in the Sunday. So I'm going to give Charles Leclerc a 7 out of 10 for that performance yesterday. In P4, and having a rather lonely race and not really doing anything, obviously expected to, the Red Bull is still massively better than the midfield competitors, but it's really dropped off Mercedes and Ferrari, so they are in the position that they've been in for a few seasons now, where they're in a league of their own. They're not being challenged from below, but they're also not challenging above. So a really difficult race for Red Bull as a constructor, and for Max, he did what he needed to do. So for me, it's a 7 out of 10. It was nothing kind of exceptional, but it's still a very good drive getting P4. He maximised the results that he could get in that Red Bull yesterday. In P5, we have one of my contenders for driver of the day, Alexander Albon, starting the race from the pit lane. He was able to make his way through the entire field and was able to overtake Carlos Sainz in the closing stages of the race. Yes, the Red Bull is better, so it should be able to get through, but some of the overtakes he was pulling off, and considering that the crash that Albon had in qualifying, I think it really shows that, you know, it was a fantastic drive by the young Thai British driver, and to come back from that and build his confidence, he pushes himself to the edge, and it's only something that's going to benefit him. Yesterday I thought his performance was an 8 out of 10. I thought a very good move, although it's expected to genuinely finish within the top 6, because if Vettel finished it would have been a 6, but it was P5 on the day. So me, Alexander Albon, an 8 out of 5. A very good performance, and outdrove Verstappen yesterday, but it is obviously, he had more to do, but he did it. So yeah, well done Alexander Albon. Moving on to P6, and Carlos Sainz, after all the kind of trouble he's had in the second half of the season, has returned to what we all expected him to be doing in the previous races, without the pit stop and the technical difficulties that he had been experiencing, and obviously the collision with Hulkenberg last race out. Absolutely fantastic drive. The only thing stopping him getting a 9 out of 10 for me today was he wasn't able to hang on to that P5 position from Alex Albon at the end. He did finish P6, finished best of the rest, back to where he had been competing before the summer break. Another really great drive by Carlos Sainz. An 8 out of 10 for me. And P7 was the Mexican Checo Perez. He is having a fantastic second half to this season. He didn't have any engine problems in this race, and so then he returned to his form of Spa and Monza. Since the upgrades have come in, he was feeling confident going into this race, and he got the best performance he says that they could have got out of that car, and I'm inclined to agree with them. They're not on the levels of where the McLaren and Renault should be, and he beat one McLaren and one Renault as well. So an absolutely fantastic drive by Sergio Perez. He's getting a 8 out of 10 as well, and also one of my contenders for driver of the day. In P8 we had Lando Norris, and he drove a very solid drive. He struggled with tyre wear later on, one of the drivers to not benefit from that virtual safety car, in terms of he had made his pit stop there, not managing to compete with Carlos Sainz on a Sunday again, but it was still a strong points finish. It's where McLaren extend their lead over Renault in the Constructors' Championship, and a really solid drive by Lando Norris. It's a 7 out of 10 for me. He struggled there in F2 last year. It's not one of his favoured tracks, so to still score a points finish, a track that is not one of his strongest, is still a very good performance by Lando Norris. So it's a 7 out of 10 for me. In P9, and Haas have scored a point. I said in my race preview that it'll be interesting to see how this kind of hybrid combination between the Australia spec and updates would work, and they massively benefited from the virtual safety car, one of the many midfield teams who did benefit that, as well as obviously the Mercedes, and Kevin Magnussen drove really well. For me, he showed the positives of Kevin Magnussen, where he fights hard in that midfield and puts in time. Obviously the Haas is still not on the level of those top end of the midfield teams, so to get a points finish was absolutely fantastic, and holding off the likes of Lando Norris and Nico Hulkenberg at the end. So yeah, was really impressed with K-Mag's performance there. So he is going to get a 7 out of 10 for me. In P10, guys, we have Nico Hulkenberg. His Renault managing to sneak into the points, and he was one of the benefactors of the virtual safety car, but it wasn't a great drive by Nico Hulkenberg for me. On the fresher set of soft tyres, trying to compete against Lando Norris, who was on an older set of medium compounds, he wasn't able to get past him. And I know Sochi isn't the easiest track to overtake on, but I would have certainly expected Nico Hulkenberg to find a way past Lando Norris, certainly with his experience on the field. And like I said in Lando Norris's section, it's not his strongest race, and also wasn't able to catch the Haas of Kevin Magnussen at the end as well, by not getting past Lando Norris. So yes, it was a good points finish to get for Renault, but it's not a great drive for Nico Hulkenberg for me. It's a 6 out of 10. Then we come to Lance Stroll in P11, and he's improving. He is getting better Again, he managed to get into Q2, although you can say the benefit of that came from grid penalties by other drivers, mainly the Honda drivers, pushing him probably into that Q2 position. But on a race day, he is very good again. He has made up 4 places from the 15th position that he started. So yes, solid on the Sunday. Another benefit of the virtual safety car, but wasn't able to get past Nico Hülkenberg. And if you look at the performance of his teammate Sergio Perez and the strong race he has, you have to be a bit harsher on Lance Stroll. So I gave Sergio Perez an 8 out of 10. So for me, I'm going to give Lance Stroll a 6 out of 10. P12 in his home Grand Prix was Daniel Kvyat, and obviously he started from the back, replacing all those parts of the engines, wasn't able to take part in any of qualifying, was able to make up positions, finished ahead of his teammate in who Gasly finished in P14. Yeah, the Toro Rosso wasn't really ever competing in the points. They had some good on-track fighting with Alexander Albon when he was making his way through the field, but that's all I kind of really remember from the Toro Rossos, other than obviously Gasly almost taking out Daniel Kvyat's front wing when he tried to make a pass at turn 2, which compromised the rest of Gasly's race. So for me, Daniel Kvyat, it was a pretty solid drive, and considering all things considered, I would give it a 7 out of 10 in his home Grand Prix. Had a troublesome weekend, so to get close to the points was quite an achievement for him, and he drove, I think, to the best of that car's ability on the weekend. Moving on to P13, and that was Kimi Raikkonen, and he is just having an absolute torrid time of things since the second half of the season. Ever since that crash with Verstappen at Spa that wasn't his fault, it's just been a mistake, and either that from the team or from him, and yeah, it just hasn't been great. And it was another mistake in his 307th race start, where he overtakes Michael Schumacher for Grand Prix starts. He got a full start, and yeah, it just wasn't great for him. He was always going to suffer from that point in. P13, the Alphas weren't really at it this weekend. It's a 5 out of 10 for me for Kimi Raikkonen. Moving on to P14, and that is Pierre Gasly. Now, he had some very good on-track fighting with Alexander Albon. He was not giving up position, and he was showing Red Bull what he's got, and he was still very good in this Toro Rosso car since, but then he pushed it for a move too much when he tried to overtake his teammate Daniel Kvyat around the outside on turn 2, and yeah, he suffered from there, making sure that he dropped to P14. I think he took a lot out of his tyres after that position, so it's going to be a 6 out of 10 for me. Performance that showed promise from Pierre Gasly, but ultimately fell short. Moving on to the last of the classified finishers, and that is P15 of Antonio Giovinazzi, and his race was really compromised from that first lap sandwich that him, Grosjean and Ricciardo got caught in. Obviously Grosjean and Ricciardo both had to retire from it. I wasn't sure of actually Ricciardo's retirement in the end, but obviously he was trailing at the back ever since that collision on the first lap, and Giovinazzi struggled from that as well. It wasn't really his fault. He was caught in a bit of a trap in the middle of those two. He didn't have anywhere to go. It was just a racing incident. These things happen. Squeezed for space, ran out of space, made contact with Grosjean, and yeah, it is a 5 out of 10 for Giovinazzi for me. Now on to the drivers who got DNFs, and we'll start off with the 2 Williams. So first up, Robert Kubica. He was retired on safety grounds because of what was George Russell's retirement, was a brakes failure. They were worried that the same thing might happen to Robert Kubica, and obviously Russell's, it wasn't great crash, but at least he was going slow at that part. If it had been on one of the higher speed corners, it could have really caused serious damage. So not really Kubica's fault, was doing what he could in the car. It's a 5 out of 10 for me. Then we have George Russell, and yeah, there we go, he DNF'd from the race, crashed into the wall because he had a brakes failure, so not his fault at all. Again, was driving to the best of his ability in that Williams car. It is hard to kind of really compare them to anything because it is still so far off being competitive with any of the other teams, so for me, George Russell is a 5 out of 10 as well. Moving on to who I think would have won the race because he was so much quicker than Charles Leclerc on the day. Absolutely fantastic drive. His Saturday performances may have not matched Charles Leclerc, but on a Sunday, this was back to classic Vettel. He was pushing, and I completely disagree with the team orders that were trying to manufacture him, and it may have, I don't know, he may have pushed the car too far when he was out on those soft tyres, when he was asking to pit and Ferrari wouldn't pit him and were forcing him to stay out. For me, Sebastian Vettel drove the near perfect race up until the MG UK failure. So for me, he's a 9 out of 10. And like I said, I think he would have been the race winner if he hadn't been forced to retire from the race with something that was out of his control. Daniel Ricciardo and Romain Grosjean are the last two. I'll start off with Ricciardo. It's difficult really, they're both going to get the same rating. Yeah, involved in that sandwich at the start, racing incident, no one really at fault. 5 out of 10. Again, Ricciardo, the luck doesn't really seem to be with him today. He seems to, but with drivers who put themselves in positions to have overtakes, the danger does always seem to kind of draw to them. But today wasn't one of those incidents. It was just racing incidents. Some people get involved with them, and unfortunately for Giovinazzi, Ricciardo and Grosjean's races, it was them on that day. So a 5 out of 10 for Ricciardo. And that means that Romain Grosjean, to round things off, a 5 out of 10. Not his fault, involved in a collision again, very frustrating for him because he had an absolutely fantastic qualifying, getting that Haas into Q3. Would have been interesting seeing how well Magnussen performed and benefited from that virtual safety car. Would Grosjean have been able to finish in the points, and would they have been able to get a double points finish? We'll never know. But Haas definitely looked like they were taking a step in the right direction, although still nowhere near where they would like to be. And that, guys, rounds off my driver ratings. Don't forget, get involved in the comments below. Let me know, do you agree with my ratings? What are your driver ratings? If you disagree with me, tell me what you would rate them and why. For me, my driver of the day is Alexander Albon. Although I think Vettel was, yeah, I gave him the highest rating, I don't think I can give a driver of the day to a guy who hadn't finished the race. So Alexander Albon, coming from the pits all the way up to 5th position, was a fantastic drive for me. So he gets my driver of the day. And guys, if you like this video, don't forget, give it a thumbs up. And like I said at the start, if you're new around here, guys, don't forget, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification, and you can keep up to date with all our latest content. And maybe check out some of our other videos that we've got out. I'll put up a video of our qualifying live reaction up here, and I'll also do our F1 play predictions to see how many me and Ash got right down here for you guys. But you F1 fans, keep racing!